Welcome to Acronym TV. I'm your host, Dennis Trainer Jr., and these are some of the top stories that we are following this week. Holocaust revisionism is back in the news again, but this time it's not a white supremacist neo-Nazi group who crawled out from under a rock in MISSISSIPPI, but Israel's Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu himself, who is seeking to rewrite history, claiming that it was a Palestinian, Amin al-Husseini, the Grand Mufti of Jerusalem at the time, who provided the inspiration for Hitler's Holocaust.
Hitler didn't want to exterminate the Jews at the time. He wanted to expel the Jews. And Haj Amin al-Husseini went to Hitler and said, if you expel them, they'll all come here. So what should I do with them? He asked. You said, burn them.
Got that? Hitler, like Lee Harvey Oswald, was a patsy. A Palestinian planted the idea in Hitler's head, then disappeared over the grassy knoll, and history has been focusing on the wrong guy ever since. Hitler has been resigned to the book depository of history, a lone shooter who only gets to make appearances in online forums when trolls all juiced up with whiskey and weed proves Goodwin's Law. And by that time in the discussion, who's really listening anymore? Really, besides the troll himself, the girlfriend who he has handcuffed in his basement, and my poor dear mom, who reads every comment in every single video I have ever published. Hi Mom, aren't you proud? But perhaps I'm taking Bibi out of context. I mean, technology these days, right? I mean, I can take a 10-second quote and twist it all around to suit whatever purpose I want. So let's be fair. Let's back up a little bit.
My grandfather came to this land in 1920, and he landed in Jaffa, and very shortly after he landed, he went to the immigration office in Jaffa, and a few months later it was burnt down by marauders.
Okay, I get it. Your grandpa, 1920, World War I had just ended, the Treaty of Versailles had just been ratified. Some people point to that treaty as an overly punitive one towards Germany, you know. Some even called it a Carthaginian peace, referencing the, quote, peace imposed on Carthage by Rome, wherein Carthage lost all its land, was forced to demilitarize, fork over money to Rome, and basically couldn't do anything without Rome's permission. And even this wasn't enough for the Romans, who eventually burned Carthage to the ground, enslaved its people. Those kinds of conditions, some would say, made it inevitable, hindsight being what it is, that a rampant nationalism would emerge in Germany that, combined with the historical kismet that history's most evil human being was coming of age, made it inevitable that Hitler became, Hitler. But I'm sorry to interrupt, Bibi. You were about to blame the Holocaust on a Palestinian. Carry on.
This attack and other attacks on the Jewish community in 1920 and 1921, 1929, were instigated by a call of the Mufti of Jerusalem, Haj Amin al-Husseini. Hitler didn't want to exterminate the Jews at the time. He wanted to expel the Jews. And Haj Amin al-Husseini went to Hitler and said, if you expel them, they'll all come here. So what should I do with them? He asked. You said, burn them. And he was sought during the Nuremberg trials for prosecution. He escaped it. Later died in cancer after the war, died of cancer in Cairo. But this is what Haj Amin al-Husseini said. He said, the Jews seek to destroy the Temple Mount. My grandfather in 1920 seeks to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque. So this lie is about 100 years old.
Oh yes, of course, it's all about the present moment, isn't it? As all history is. Netanyahu's comments in a speech to the World Zionist Congress in Jerusalem were presented in the context of the current violence between Israelis and Palestinians, and Netanyahu can inspire and inflame the ongoing extermination of Palestinian people if he paints a picture of Palestinians as anti-Semitic instead of what they justifiably are, anti-colonial. Moving on. In a new TED Talk released earlier this week, investigative journalist Will Potter talks about his visit to secretive prisons on U.S. soil that are being referred to by prisoners and guards as little Guantanamos because they are for political prisoners.
The government calls these units Communications Management Units, or CMUs. Prisoners and guards call them Little Guantanamo. They are islands unto themselves. But unlike Gitmo, they exist right here, at home, floating within larger federal prisons.
Through court documents and other research methods, some things are known. Between 60 and 70 prisoners are held in these little gitmos, and they almost all are Muslims. One such prisoner, Dr. Rafael Dafir, his crime? Violating the economic sanctions on Iraq by sending medical supplies there. Among the non-Muslim prisoners is the animal rights activist and environmental activist Daniel McGowan.
McGowan was convicted of participating in 2 arsons in the name of defending the environment as part of the Earth Liberation Front. During his sentencing, he was afraid that he would be sent to a rumored secret prison for terrorists. The judge dismissed all those fears, saying that they weren't supported by any facts. But that might be because the government hasn't fully explained why some prisoners end up in a CMU and who is responsible for these decisions. When McGowan was transferred, he was told it's because he is a domestic terrorist, a term the FBI uses repeatedly when talking about environmental activists. At one point, the prison warden himself recommended McGowan's transfer out of the CMU, citing his good behavior. But the warden was overruled by the Bureau of Prisons Counterterrorism Unit, working with the Joint Terrorism Task Force of the FBI.
At first blush, one feels outrage at the existence of these little Guantanamos because they are un-American, right? And yet, in the pursuit of maintaining and expanding the American empire, a communications management unit becomes, in name and title, a very honest thing, speaking to what has become a very American activity. We'll link to Will Thomas's full TED Talk video, essential viewing in my opinion, at acronymtv.com.
I don't believe that nicotine or our products are addictive.
I believe nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
I believe that nicotine is not addictive.
And I believe I can fly. I believe I can touch the sky. I think about it every night and day. Spread my wings and fly away. Excuse me, I forgot myself just a little bit there. Just as CEOs of Big Tobacco knew that the last thing they were selling is an addictive product that will kill people, new reports are emerging that Exxon has a lot in common with Philip Morris.
Since the mid-90s, ExxonMobil has spent millions of dollars to spread denial and doubt about man-made climate change. In 1997, then Chairman Lee Raymond campaigned fiercely against the Kyoto Protocol, telling a conference in Beijing the case for so-called global warming is far from airtight. There's a lot we really don't know about how climate will change in the 21st century and beyond.
Well, from a business perspective, you could almost understand that Exxon executives could even believe in their heart of hearts in what they were saying. We all say self-serving things motivated by our own petty little agendas, don't we? It's not like Exxon had a research division itself looking into whether or not the burning of fossil fuels, i.e. using the product they were selling as intended, would influence the global climate or anything.
Recent reports by the LA Times and the Pulitzer Prize-winning Inside Climate News document how Exxon's own scientists were researching and drawing conclusions about climate change as far back as 1977. One of them reportedly informed the company's management committee, quote, "There is general scientific agreement that the most likely manner in which mankind is influencing the global climate is through carbon dioxide released from the burning of fossil fuels."
Ah yes, in 1977, Rod Stewart had the #1 song Michael Jackson Was Still Black, and the first Star Wars movie hit the theaters. ExxonMobil is like the Galactic Empire's Death Star, a heavily armed and armored space station capable of destroying entire planets. The question now before us is, can we channel Obi-Wan Kenobi, use the Force, and destroy the Death Star? You think it's impossible? You're sick of Star Wars metaphors? What are you, a climate science fiction denier? Sorry, that was also a bit of a stretch, wasn't it? Not so funny. Maybe I should spend some more time writing. How about, instead of hoping for some Joseph Campbell hero's mythic journey to play out, we revoke ExxonMobil's corporate charter, even nationalize the whole oil industry, repurposing it to transition to a 100% renewable energy system, and use the profits from our nationalized system to abolish student debt and provide a guaranteed income for all. What say you? My name is Dennis Traynor Jr., and you are watching Acronym TV. What do you stand for? Acronym TV is produced with underwriting support from Occupy.com, a news and media channel amplifying the voices of the global 99%. Find out more and donate at Occupy.com. And our top story this week, a 14-year-old Palestinian boy sustained wounds and bruises earlier after he was attacked by extremist Israeli settlers while picking olives near Jenin in the occupied West Bank. Roll video.
An outbreak of deadly violence and terror. An elderly Israeli woman is in serious but stable condition after being stabbed by a Palestinian terrorist near Jerusalem's central bus station earlier.
No. I mean, yes, that happened, but that's not the story, right? I mean, the story we should cover is the Israeli army fired live rounds, rubber-coated steel bullets, and tear gas at the Palestinians as protests continue across the West Bank and Jerusalem against the ongoing Israeli escalation and violations. Roll that video.
Breaking tonight, Israel is on high alert following a growing wave of terror attacks. Israeli troops now being sent to cities across the country to assist the more than 4,000 extra police officers who have been deployed. And today we are seeing some graphic new videos showing just how brutal the violence has become.
No, sorry folks, the engineer today is out of control. Help wanted, engineer at Acronym TV.
Days of rage usually include Palestinian rioting and confrontation with Israeli troops at flashpoints in Judea and Samaria or the West Bank.
Judea and Samaria or the West Bank? Are you kidding me, Christian Broadcast Network? This is a conflict where biblical allusions take on extra significance, where the Old Testament is waved about like a real estate deed, and where the United States stands hip to hip and cheek by jowl, arm over shoulder with Israel against the rest of the world, brutally enforcing a military and media policy that can best be summed up with the phrase, "Free Israel, fuck Palestine." Roll tape, any tape.
More than 500,000 Israeli settlers live in the occupied West Bank and East Jerusalem. That's double the number that was there just a decade ago. Depending on your perspective, these settlements are either a natural extension of the Israeli state or the single biggest obstacle to peace in the Middle East.
No, actually, all settlement activity in occupied territory must cease without preconditions, and Israel must immediately initiate a process of withdrawal of all settlers. That's not me talking. That's the UN Human Rights Council saying Israel was in violation of Article 49 of the 4th Geneva Convention, which forbids the transfer of civilian populations to occupied territory. And of course, they said this in 2013, before the siege on Gaza last summer. At that time, I spoke with Mint Press News editor Mahar Mahawish, and when asked if we can define Israel as a terrorist state, as an apartheid state, she told me,
and we actually just heard Israel being referred to as a terrorist state by Bolivia's Evo Morales. He's the one who said that Israel is a terrorist state because he believes that that Israel has showed no value of Palestinian human life. It valued the lives of Israelis and Jews, but not the life of the Palestinians. In terms of apartheid, Israel is an apartheid state. It has separated the Palestinian people in the Gaza Strip, which is now considered the largest open-air prison in the world, and then the people in the West Bank. And the people that are living in the West Bank are also living, behind the apartheid wall, which Israel is referring to as a security fence, but it is nothing but an apartheid wall, separating families from each other and basically holding the Palestinian population prison behind the apartheid wall. And if you look at Israeli policies as well, they do constitute apartheid because there are specific laws made for Jews, and then there are specific laws made for Palestinians who are Muslim and Christian, and that constitutes apartheid. And when it comes to genocide, Israel has been committing ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian population since its inception. And although Netanyahu likes to tell the world that look at the Palestinians, look at Hamas, they want to ensure that there is no Israeli state and they want to wipe Israel off of the face of this map. If you look at the facts on the ground, again, Israel has been doing everything in its power to ensure that Palestine does not exist. And that's what we've been seeing. And this is all, again, a reflection of apartheid, genocide, and essentially colonialism.
You know, in the 1960s, British psychologist Peter Wasson conducted research yielding what we know now of as the confirmation bias. That is, humans have a strong tendency to seek out information that confirms their existing beliefs. Perhaps Americans existing, as we do in a cultural, legal, and political climate that is built on systemic white supremacy, and yet lacking the vision, as of this moment, to see that reality clearly as a whole means that we have a lot in common with Israelis. I mean, I feel for Israeli citizens, I do. They're very misunderstood. As citizens of a country whose government engages in preemptive attacks that lead to humanitarian crises, all the while flaunting international law despite the majority of them objecting to the actions of their leaders, we have a lot in common. I mean, our countries are both Goliaths who justify the act of murdering Davids during peacetime and then call the day that retaliation comes a terrorist act. Our existing beliefs are informed by what our TV tells us, right? Over and over and over again. The ruling elite who benefit from a status quo here in the United States are slow to see. In fact, they actively deny the mountains of evidence in front of them that show how the United States is systemically racist. Even well-meaning, clumsy white allies like me are beneficiaries of this system. And so it is important to lift up recent efforts like the one issued from over 60 leading black and Palestinian artists and activists affirming black Palestinian solidarity in a new video from blackpalestiniansolidarity.com.
When I see them, I see us.
Every 28 hours, a black life is stolen by police or vigilantes in the U.S.
Every 2 hours, a Palestinian child was killed in Israel's attack on Gaza last summer.
Eric Garner, 43 years old, father of 6, grandfather, friend.
Ghalia El-Ghannam, 7 years old, killed when an Israeli missile struck her home.
Hashem Abu Maria, 45 years old, father of 4, human rights worker.
Ayanna Jones, 7 years old, killed in her sleep by Detroit police.
When I see them,
I see us. Harassed, beaten, tortured, dehumanized.
Stopped and frisked, searched at checkpoints.
Administrative detention, youth incarceration. When I see them,
I see us.
From Rikers Island to Ofer Prison.
From Rafah to Chicago.
Lives are being stolen.
Remember them.
We are not statistics. We are not collateral damage. We have names and faces.
Sakia.
Nadim.
Kimani.
Jawahir.
Renisha.
Muhammad.
They burned me alive in Jerusalem.
They gunned me down in Chicago.
They shot our water tanks in Hebron.
They cut off our water in Detroit.
They demolished our homes in the Nakab.
They swallowed our homes in New Orleans.
When I see them, I see us.
They see our wombs as dangerous, label us demographic threats. They sterilize us without our knowledge.
Mark our children as criminal.
We say no to all forms of oppression, in U.S. cities or on Palestine's streets.
We respect the uniqueness of our struggles and our varied histories.
When I see them, I see us. Resilient, steadfast, determined, I see who we were meant to be.
Alive, free, liberated.
Mapping out our destiny.
I see hope.
Strength.
Love.
A place where our children can dream.
I see a road.
A partner.
A family.
A world where we can rise
and be seen.
American politicians who suffer from the confirmation bias I mentioned earlier are quick to condemn Palestinians for violence and stand fast with Israel. At least on the left side of the political spectrum, all political politicians seem to acknowledge that the issue of systemic racism is the biggest domestic issue of our time, but they're out of step, aren't they, with those who would join the chorus and say, from Ferguson to Palestine, occupation is a crime. One nonviolent tactic that's gaining international momentum is the Boycott, Divest, and Sanction Movement, or BDS. If politicians really want to help avoid future violence, they should endorse the BDS movement now. Quite simply, as described on their website, BDS is the global movement for a campaign of boycott, divestment, and sanctions against Israel until it complies with international law. BDS is a strategy that allows people of conscience to play an effective role in the Palestinian struggle for justice. No justice, no peace. Among those people of conscience BDS can currently count are 0 candidates for United States president. Not Hillary Clinton, of course, not Bernie Sanders, not even, as of today, Green Party presidential candidate Jill Stein. Although I suspect if she hears from her supporters, she will endorse and sign on to the BDS movement. And so I ask you to add your name today to demand the United States candidate for president, specifically the 3 I just mentioned, endorse Boycott, Divest, and Sanction, BDS. You can add your name at acronymtv.com. The early success of the Bernie Sanders campaign has delighted many and surprised even more. As we get deeper into the fall of 2015, even Clinton advisors concede there is a very real chance that Bernie Sanders can win early key contests like New Hampshire primary and the Iowa caucus. That, combined with recent news that Sanders is actually ahead of where Barack Obama was in 2007 in terms of fundraising polls and crowd numbers, has many people thinking that a true adversary to the Wall Street greed is good culture that is driving the criminal increase in wealth inequality, that Bernie Sanders is actually more than just an insurgent campaign that will simply fade away. Early criticisms of Bernie's campaign from the far left have included a critique I myself have found much truth in, a comparison of Sanders to other insurgent campaigns like Dennis Kucinich, Jesse Jackson, and Howard Dean and others, campaigns that effectively herded activist energies and disenchanted left voters back into the Democratic fold. But that is an argument that's increasingly hard to make the longer that Sanders surges in the polls. My guest today, David DeGraw, also sees a path for Bernie Sanders to reach the White House. It's an unusual one. It involves Bernie Sanders defecting from the Democratic Party and running outside the two-party system. David has started a new committee to elect an independent president at tip.vote and recently authored a detailed strategy proposal entitled How Bernie Can Win the Presidency, #BerntheDNC. David, welcome back to Acronym TV.
Hey, Dennis, thanks for having me. I love your work. Always inspired to be on with you.
Well, you've certainly had your finger on the pulse of a massive shift in the past. Many people credit you with coining the phrases 99% and the 1%, in large part because you wrote about and organized around those concepts using those terms before Occupy Wall Street emerged. You predict a similar paradigm shift and have launched tip.vote to help elect an independent presidential candidate. Here's a short video introduction I'm going to show the folks at home, David.
Got a real problem, and I'm tired of Republicans and Democrats. An entire integrated system, financial system, trading system, taxing system that was created by both parties over a period of 2 decades is at work on our entire country right now. This is a mathematical fact. Tens of trillions of dollars are being extracted from the United States of America. There is a refusal on both the Democratic and the Republican side of the aisle to acknowledge the mathematical problem, which is the United States of America is being extracted. People of the United States of America, your Congress is bought. Your Congress is incapable of making legislation on healthcare, banking, trade, or taxes because if they do it, they will lose their political funding. We have to get the money out of politics, and there's not a single politician that has stepped forward. Democrats aren't doing it. Republicans are not doing it. I'm going to abandon the bloc Congress like Teddy Roosevelt did, and I'm going to go to the people of the United States and I'm going to say, you've got a bloc Congress, and the banking system is fully corrupt and defrauding us. And I come out and say that, which is what I want my president to do, that at that exact moment I say, you know what, we got a screwed up situation here, people. You all know it, and now what? I'm going to admit it. And as a result, not only have I admitted it, but we're going to begin the process of solving it like grown-ups. They did it in World War II. They did it after the Civil War. We have to deal with the extraction that is at foot. There's a refusal on both the Democratic and the Republican side of the aisle to acknowledge the mathematical problem, which is tens of trillions of dollars are being extracted from the United States of America.
That was Dylan Radigan there with the voiceover, and I can feel the audience rolling their eyes, David, saying it can't be done. An independent or third-party campaign cannot win the White House. Tell the audience why they are wrong.
Oh, because I looked at extensive polling and data, and the American public has clearly had enough of the two-party system. You know, the numbers I just referenced, 7% has confidence in Congress. Only 20% believes that they have the consent of the governed. From a social media aspect, look at Bernie's success in small fundraising and the ability to get out the vote. I just think we've crossed that tipping point where the American public doesn't want a Republican and a Democrat. The American public has caught on to the fact, it's very easy to divide and conquer the American public when you only have a two-party system, because you get, partisan gridlock, and the Republicans blame the Democrats blame the Republicans, and, you get what we have, which is gridlock for anything that benefits the American public. And, legislation passed on behalf of the corporations that have the most money to fund both parties. The American public gets that now, and I think the political zeitgeist has clearly aligned for what I think is a Teddy Roosevelt-esque moment, where you have a bold independent candidate who steps out of the two-party system, calls bullshit on both bought-off parties, and points the way to a new paradigm.
All right. Okay, that's a good transition. Speaking of bullshit, as a friend, I can say this to you. You and I both know that Bernie Sanders is going to continue seeking the nomination of the Democratic Party. He is not, under any circumstances, going to run as an independent or with a third party. Yet you have created a detailed analysis and put a lot of energy trying to tap into the Bernie Sanders energy and get people who are feeling the burn to do exactly what?
You can say what you want about the Green Party, but they would have much more support if Bernie ran on the Green Party ticket or something like that, and it would be much more feasible for him to win. And what I wanted to point out before was, when you look at the general election polling, and you have Trump, Bush, Clinton, Sanders, all the people who are presently running. Sanders does incredibly well. He's something like 20 points ahead of Trump. And Clinton is like at 9%, way, like, I think she's 9th or something like that.
Okay, fair enough. Let's touch on the last point here. The Commission on Presidential Debates currently has a monopoly over who gets on the main debate stage after the primary season is over. There have been 2 separate lawsuits filed against the CPD. There have been 2 separate lawsuits initiated against the CPD. Can an independent candidate win the election without being on the debate stage with the primary winner from the Democrat and the Republican parties?
Well, you bring up a really important point. The Commission on Presidential Debates, that's how they have locked down the two-party system, by not allowing in independent and third-party candidates. And again, okay, fine, Bernie's not going to jump. But if Bernie jumped, he would have the name recognition and the polling to get into the presidential debates, even if he was an independent candidate. Because right now, the way they set the bar is you need to have 15% polling in early in early polls to get into the debates. And being that Bernie has been running as a Democrat, he will have that polling. We're going to make them look ridiculous. The American public has caught up to us, Dennis. Believe it or not, I've been looking through polls, left and right, analyzing the data. The American public is now, they caught up to us. They're into it. The jig is up.
That's our show for this week. My name is Dennis Traynor Jr., asking you to ask yourself, what do you stand for?